What happens when a woman is forced into a nursing home against her will? Trudy turns despair into determination and transforms the place into the heart of the whole town. What happened next left everyone speechless. Gertrude, Trudy Lawrence, had always been the heart of her family and the beating soul of her small town. For decades, she hosted garden parties, organized charity bake sales, and ran the local quilting club out of her rambling, ivy-draped home. But time crept up on her, arthritis stiffened her hands, and a stumble on the stairs one autumn afternoon set in motion a chain of decisions she would not be allowed to control. Her children, Emily and Charles, were loving but pragmatic. The conversation was gentle but relentless. "It's for your safety, Mom. You'll have help, new friends, and no worries." Their voices grew softer as the moving day approached, as if compassion might soften the sharp edge of inevitability. Trudy listened. She smiled. She told them she understood, because it was what they needed to hear. But inside, her heart was a wild storm of loss and anger. She spent her final night in her house wandering from room to room, trailing her fingers along the faded wallpaper, brushing the dust off family photos, inhaling the scent of gardenia that lingered from her last bouquet. She tried to memorize every detail, the way light slanted through the kitchen window, the creak of the stairs, the pattern of knots in the banister wood, knowing this would soon belong to memory alone. The morning of the move, neighbors gathered on her porch to say goodbye. Mrs. Parsons brought a jar of homemade jam, and old Mr. Fisher pressed a trembling hand into hers. "You made this place special, Trudy. Don't let them take the fight out of you." Trudy promised she wouldn't, though the ache in her chest made her doubt it. When the moving van pulled away, Trudy sat in the back seat of Emily's car, her lap filled with a single suitcase and her favorite quilt. She stared at the house growing smaller in the rearview mirror. No one spoke. Sunnydale Senior Living was a place with good intentions but faded cheer. The lobby was filled with plastic flowers and the scent of cleaning spray. The walls were hung with faded prints of gardens and lighthouses. Trudy was greeted by a nurse named Carla, who spoke to her as if she were a child. "We're going to get you all settled in, dear." Her room was small, with a narrow window that overlooked a parking lot. On her first evening, Trudy met her neighbors: Gloria, who played bingo 3 times a day, Mrs. Barlow, who muttered to herself and hoarded peppermints, and Mr. Wilkes, who sat near the television but never watched it. Staff bustled through the halls, bustling and busy but not unfriendly. There was a weekly calendar taped to the door, movie nights, puzzle afternoons, and a Wednesday craft hour no one seemed to enjoy. Trudy unpacked her few things and sat on the bed, feeling utterly alone. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to do next. That night, as the building settled into quiet and the hall lights dimmed, Trudy lay awake. She remembered the words of Mr. Fisher, "Don't let them take the fight out of you." Maybe she couldn't change where she was, but she didn't have to become invisible. She was still Trudy Lawrence, after all. She got up, slipped her slippers on, and made a cup of tea in the tiny kitchenette. As she sipped, she sketched a plan on the back of an envelope, a list of ideas, names, and the beginnings of something bold. If this place was to be her new home, she would not let it be a place of slow decline and silent goodbyes. As dawn crept across the parking lot and painted her window with gold, Trudy smiled to herself. They had forced her into Sunnydale, but she would decide what happened next. The first week at Sunnydale Senior Living tested every ounce of Trudy Lawrence's patience. She watched as the residents drifted through their days, meals eaten in silence, card games played without laughter, and most conversations ending in a sigh about the way things used to be. The staff was polite, but efficient to a fault. Activities were run by a young woman named Bridget, who, though well-meaning, had no idea how to coax real joy from her audience. Trudy observed everything. She noticed that Gloria only perked up during bingo if she won, that Mr. Wilkes liked jazz records, but the common room always played pop music from the staff's playlist, that Mrs. Barlow's muttering stopped whenever she was given a peppermint. She paid attention to the empty garden at the building's edge, just a patch of neglected soil and a broken bench. No one seemed to use it, but it caught the sunlight perfectly at noon. Trudy's first attempt to break the monotony was simple. She brought her knitting to the common room and worked by the window, humming her favorite tune. It wasn't long before Gloria sidled over, her curiosity piqued. "You know how to make those fancy dishcloths?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "Only if someone helps me with the pattern," Trudy replied, sliding over a spare ball of yarn. Within minutes, 2 more residents joined, and a gentle circle of conversation formed, punctuated by laughter when Mr. Wilkes tried, and failed, to knit a straight line. The next morning, Trudy approached Bridget with a suggestion. "How about we start a real gardening club?" Bridget looked unsure, but agreed to add it to the activity calendar. Trudy asked the staff for a few hand tools and a packet of seeds, zinnias, marigolds, and morning glories. To her surprise, the staff not only found the tools but dug up a stack of unused pots and soil from the maintenance closet. At the first meeting, only Gloria and Mr. Wilkes appeared, but Trudy pressed on, showing them how to mix compost, plant seeds, and mark the rows. Gloria grumbled about the dirt, but by the end of the afternoon, her hands were muddy and her smile was real. As the days passed, more residents stopped by the garden. Mrs. Barlow wandered out, drawn by the scent of soil and the sight of her old friend, Mrs. Nash, reminiscing about tomato harvests. Soon, Trudy had organized a watering schedule, made plant markers from popsicle sticks, and started a compost heap with kitchen scraps. Staff and residents alike were drawn to the transformation. Patches of green emerged, and laughter drifted through the open windows. Trudy also began to shake up the evening routine. She convinced Bridget to try story night in the lounge, where residents could share tales from their younger days. Trudy kicked things off with a story about her first dance, how she'd tripped and fallen right into her future husband's arms. The laughter that followed was infectious, and even the staff stayed to listen. Word spread quickly. The local newspaper printed a short piece about the surprising burst of life at Sunnydale. Family members began visiting more often, bringing plants, books, and even homemade treats to share at the growing events. Trudy wrote a letter to the church choir, inviting them to perform at the next Sunday brunch. The director replied with enthusiasm. By the end of her first month, Trudy had turned her initial despair into momentum. The garden was thriving, the lounge was lively, and the residents, once resigned to boredom, were eager to see what would happen next. As she watered the marigolds one afternoon, Gloria turned to her and whispered, "You know, Trudy, I think you're onto something here." Trudy just smiled, watching sunlight dance on the petals. "We're just getting started." With every passing week, Trudy's influence grew stronger at Sunnydale Senior Living. What had begun as a few tentative changes soon ignited a chain reaction of excitement among the residents and staff alike. The garden, once a forlorn plot of dirt, was now a riot of color: zinnias, marigolds, snapdragons, and even a hopeful tomato vine, all tended with care. Suncatchers made by the knitting group glittered in the morning light, drawing passers-by from the parking lot to peek at what was blooming. But it wasn't just the garden. Trudy's weekly story night became the talk of the halls. Residents dusted off old photo albums, unearthed keepsakes, and practiced their stories during breakfast, eager for their turn in the spotlight. Mr. Wilkes, always quiet before, surprised everyone with tales of his years as a jazz drummer in a traveling band. Mrs. Barlow recounted a childhood prank involving a goat and the mayor's laundry line, her eyes twinkling for the first time in years. The staff noticed, too. Bridget, the activities director, found herself swamped with suggestions from residents, requests for everything from baking contests to painting classes and even a retro dance night. Trudy helped her prioritize ideas and rallied volunteers from both inside and outside Sunnydale. Soon, a retired art teacher was leading watercolor workshops, and local high school students visited to perform plays and teach technology basics to anyone brave enough to try. One Friday evening, Trudy arranged for the church choir to visit. The dining room, decorated with strings of fairy lights and fresh-cut flowers, filled quickly. More than half the town showed up, curious about the nursing home's sudden burst of activity. There was standing room only as voices soared and laughter filled the air. Family members lingered long after the music ended, sharing cake and stories with residents. The event made the front page of the Willowbrook Gazette, Sunnydale Spark, how one resident brought a town together. Seeing her efforts recognized, Trudy felt her confidence soar. She took on bigger challenges, organizing a Grandparents' Day picnic in the garden, convincing management to allow a monthly open house, and even launching a skills exchange where residents taught staff and volunteers anything from sewing to chess. She recruited Mr. Wilkes to host jazz listening sessions, and soon enough, the lounge echoed with music every Wednesday afternoon. Gloria, once resigned and snappish, became Trudy's right hand, managing the new Sunnydale newsletter. Mrs. Barlow, who had insisted she hated technology, started recording audio memories with the help of visiting students. Residents who had never left their rooms now lined up to join in, coaxed out by the energy and warmth spreading through the halls. Yet, not everyone welcomed the change. A few staff members grumbled about the extra work, and some long-time residents, wary of too much noise, retreated to quieter corners. Trudy responded as she always had, with patience and gentle persistence, always offering a hand but never forcing participation. One afternoon, as Trudy finished planting morning glories by the entrance, the administrator, Mr. Clark, approached her. He was a reserved man, wary of disruptions, but now he looked genuinely moved. "Mrs. Lawrence, I admit, I never thought I'd see the place like this. Residents are happier, families are calling to thank us. What's your secret?" Trudy smiled. "No secret, Mr. Clark. Just listening, and believing we all still have something to give." That night, Trudy sat by her window, notebook in hand, planning new activities and jotting down ideas. The lights of Willowbrook twinkled in the distance, and she felt, for the first time since moving in, not exiled, but rooted in a place that was truly hers. Sunnydale was changing. And so was she. As summer ripened, the energy within Sunnydale reached a fever pitch. Visitors now arrived regularly. Not just family, but neighbors, local business owners, and even town officials, drawn by rumors of music nights, bake-offs, and the riotous garden at the nursing home's gates. Residents beamed with pride as their artwork filled the hallways and their baked goods won blue ribbons at the county fair. The once dull lobby had been transformed into a showcase of life, color, and possibility. But with success came new challenges. Not everyone embraced the change. Some of the staff, already stretched thin, muttered about extra work and the constant flow of visitors disrupting their routines. One orderly, Mike, complained to his supervisor, "This isn't supposed to be a carnival, it's supposed to be a care facility. People come here to rest, not party." Bridget, caught in the middle, struggled to balance the demands of her job with her growing admiration for what Trudy had sparked. Even a few of the more reclusive residents felt unsettled. Mrs. Pennington, who rarely left her room, found the laughter outside her door intrusive. "All this commotion, it's not what I came here for," she told Trudy one day, her tone cold but her eyes betraying a flicker of longing. Trudy listened. She never dismissed their complaints, instead inviting them to suggest quiet activities, a book club, early morning walks, a silent movie night. She encouraged the staff to take breaks and join in the fun, making sure volunteers stepped in to lighten the load. Trudy made sure every event had a peaceful corner for those who wanted to watch from afar. The local news returned for a follow-up story. The town's mayor, whose mother had recently moved into Sunnydale, paid a visit and was moved to tears by a poetry reading led by residents. Donations and offers of help poured in, books for the library, plants for the garden, a new set of chessboards. The Sunnydale Spring Festival, which Trudy suggested as a community-wide event, was approved by the administrator, Mr. Clark, who was quickly becoming one of Trudy's most ardent supporters. Despite these successes, Trudy worried about the undercurrents. She noticed Mike, the orderly, was especially short with the residents, rushing them through meals and snapping at volunteers. One afternoon, Trudy found him alone in the staff lounge, rubbing his temples. She sat down across from him, offering a cup of tea. "You know, Mike, change is hard for everyone. But maybe if you tried joining us for just one event, you might see the good it's doing." He scoffed. "I don't have time for parties, Mrs. Lawrence. I'm here to work." Trudy smiled gently. "That's exactly why we need you. You're part of this place, too. Just come by the garden tomorrow, no strings attached." The next afternoon, Mike lingered at the garden's edge, watching as residents potted seedlings and told stories. At first he stayed silent, but when Mrs. Barlow asked him for help with a heavy bag of soil, he obliged. Soon he found himself laughing at one of Mr. Wilkes' jokes, and later, quietly enjoying a slice of homemade lemon cake. Meanwhile, Trudy continued to bring in the outside world. The children's choir sang every Saturday, local artists held painting demonstrations, and even a therapy dog made monthly rounds, delighting everyone. Mrs. Pennington, curious in spite of herself, started joining the book club, always sitting in the back with a quiet smile. The home was not just changing, it was thriving. Yet Trudy remained vigilant, determined to balance celebration with comfort, and always ready to listen to the quieter voices in the room. She understood now that true community meant not just including everyone, but making space for their differences. As she looked out over the blooming garden one warm evening, Trudy knew the road ahead would still have bumps and battles. But Sunnydale had become something she hadn't expected, a place where everyone, even the forgotten and reluctant, might find a reason to belong. By mid-autumn, Trudy's vision for Sunnydale had taken root, transforming not only the environment but also the hearts of those within it. Yet, even as the home flourished, she found herself confronted with new surprises and unexpected allies. The Sunnydale Spring Festival had been such a success that Mr. Clark, the administrator, encouraged Trudy to chair the planning committee for the upcoming Fall Harvest Fair. This event would open Sunnydale's doors to the whole town, with residents showcasing their crafts, artwork, and garden produce. Trudy accepted with a mixture of excitement and nerves, knowing it would test everything she had learned since arriving. To her delight, Mike the orderly, once the most resistant, began to show a softer side. After his first hesitant visit to the garden, he continued to help out, always under the guise of just making sure things don't get too messy. One afternoon, he surprised everyone by bringing in a crate of pumpkins and organizing a pumpkin carving contest. The residents adored it, especially when Mike revealed his hidden talent for carving animals. Bridget, meanwhile, blossomed as an activities director. Freed from rigid schedules, she found her creativity and confidence growing. She and Trudy met regularly over tea to brainstorm new activities. Together they launched Sunnydale Radio, a weekly show broadcast through the home's intercom, featuring resident stories, music requests, and messages from family. As preparations for the Harvest Fair ramped up, Trudy discovered allies outside the nursing home too. Local high school students volunteered to help decorate and set up booths. The bakery down the street donated pastries. The mayor arranged for the town band to perform. The boundaries between Sunnydale and the wider community began to blur, no longer a place for the forgotten, but a vital, celebrated part of Willowbrook life. But it wasn't only outward change that mattered. Trudy took time each day to check on the quieter residents, especially Mrs. Pennington, who had become a steady book club member. They shared quiet afternoons discussing poetry and sipping tea. Trudy encouraged her to write her own memoir, and soon Mrs. Pennington's stories became a highlight in the Sunnydale newsletter. On a golden afternoon, as Trudy strolled the garden, she noticed a group of residents sitting quietly, listening as Jack, the baker's teenage son, played guitar. Some knitted, others simply basked in the autumn sun, but all seemed content. Trudy realized the most beautiful changes weren't just in the events or decorations, but in the subtle ways people had grown closer, more open, and more alive. Still, Trudy sensed challenges on the horizon. The home's growing popularity brought new regulations and scrutiny from the corporate office. Inspectors scheduled surprise visits, and there was talk of a new administrator with a reputation for tightening up operations. Some staff worried that all the joy and openness would be swept away in a push for order. One evening, as Trudy helped hang garlands for the Harvest Fair, Mr. Clark pulled her aside. "There may be changes coming, Trudy. They might not appreciate, well, all this." His eyes were troubled. Trudy met his gaze, her determination unwavering. "Then we'll show them why it matters. This is home for all of us. And I promise, we won't go back to the way things were." That night, as the sun dipped behind the garden wall and lanterns flickered in the cool breeze, Trudy looked around at the laughter, music, and gentle bustle of friends and neighbors. She knew she would fight for this new Sunnydale, and for every resident who now called it the best place in town. The Harvest Fair was barely over when the winds of change swept into Sunnydale, this time with the chill of corporate bureaucracy. One Monday morning, a sharply dressed woman named Ms. Grantham appeared at the front desk, armed with a clipboard and a polite but steely smile. She introduced herself as the new regional director from the parent company, there to review compliance, optimize resources, and ensure consistent care standards. The staff bristled. Bridget grew anxious. Mr. Clark looked pale. Even Mike, who had only just come to love the new spirit of Sunnydale, fell silent as Ms. Grantham toured the facility. She took notes on everything: laughter in the corridors, music drifting from the lounge, volunteers bustling in the kitchen, and the garden's riot of colors. She raised an eyebrow at the hand-painted signs for the Harvest Fair still hanging in the hallway. That afternoon, she met with the Residents' Council, a new tradition Trudy had introduced, giving residents a voice in daily life. Ms. Grantham listened to their stories and praised the community's involvement, but warned, there are guidelines for visitors, food preparation, and unsupervised events. We'll have to review these activities to ensure everyone's safety and compliance. The mood in the home darkened. Bridget worried the book club would be cancelled, the garden off-limits, visiting musicians turned away. Mr. Clark confided to Trudy that the corporate office preferred predictable routines, not festivals and impromptu concerts. The threat of losing everything they'd built hung in the air. But Trudy wasn't one to back down. She gathered the staff, residents, and even the most reluctant family members for a meeting in the lounge. She explained the situation. "We've made this place special, not by breaking rules, but by caring for one another. If we're going to keep it, we have to show Ms. Grantham and the company what Sunnydale truly means." The days that followed saw a burst of determination. Residents wrote letters, dozens of them, describing how the garden, the events, and the new spirit had changed their lives. Families added their voices, sending emails and phone calls to the company. Bridget created a day in the life at Sunnydale video, capturing laughter, friendships, art, and shared meals. Mike, once the skeptic, offered to handle all safety documentation and suggested ways to improve, not dismantle, the activities. When Ms. Grantham returned for her final review, she was greeted by a home transformed, not just by flowers and art, but by gratitude and unity. She attended a story night, listened to Mrs. Pennington read from her memoir, and watched as a visiting school choir performed. She sampled lemon bars baked by the residents and heard from families about how their loved ones had regained a sense of purpose. After several tense meetings, Ms. Grantham called everyone together. Her voice was softer than before. "It's clear that what you have here goes far beyond activities or decor. Sunnydale is a community, and that's the kind of care we want to support. As long as you follow basic safety guidelines, I see no reason to limit what you're doing. In fact, I'd like to use some of your ideas in other homes." The news was met with cheers, tears, and a round of applause. Bridget hugged Trudy, who beamed with pride. Even Ms. Grantham smiled, shaking Trudy's hand before she left. "You've shown me what's possible," she said quietly. As evening settled over the home, Trudy stood in the garden and listened to the distant laughter and music drifting on the breeze. The storm had passed, but the roots she'd planted, of hope, courage, and togetherness, were stronger than ever. Sunnydale was safe, for now. And the residents, staff, and even the town knew they had Gertrude Lawrence to thank. The weeks following Ms. Grantham's approval were some of the brightest in Sunnydale's history. With the fear of change lifted, everyone threw themselves even more passionately into community life. The garden flourished, sunflowers taller than Trudy waved at the windows, and the vegetable beds produced enough tomatoes and cucumbers for the kitchen to serve fresh salads all week. The Residents' Council became a fixture, meeting every Friday afternoon to share ideas, voice concerns, and vote on upcoming activities. Mike, once resistant, now helped Bridget organize new safety protocols for events. Even Mrs. Pennington, who still cherished her quiet, began leaving notes of encouragement for residents she saw struggling with loneliness. Word of Sunnydale's transformation spread across the county. Other care homes sent staff to observe Trudy's methods, taking notes on her open-door garden policy, resident-run events, and partnerships with the local high school and community choir. Trudy was even invited to speak at a conference on elder care innovation, though she modestly declined, insisting, "I'm just doing what I've always done, helping people find home wherever they are." The residents embraced new traditions. They held an autumn lantern walk, lighting up the garden and paths with dozens of glowing jars, each inscribed with a hope or memory. Family visits soared, and residents who once went months without seeing loved ones now enjoyed frequent guests and even overnight family stays in the guest rooms. Trudy cherished her role as both leader and friend. She helped shy newcomers feel welcome, introduced neighbors to each other, and encouraged those who felt left out to try new things. Every day brought new victories, big and small, a wheelchair-bound resident joining the gardening club, Mr. Wilkes leading a jazz sing-along for a packed lounge, Mrs. Barlow and the twins from the high school drama club putting on a short play that left the whole staff in stitches. But Trudy never forgot what brought her here, the pain of being pushed aside, the fear of fading into the background. She kept an eye out for anyone feeling left behind, sometimes simply sitting quietly with them on the garden bench, sharing stories of her own worries and hopes. On the eve of her birthday, the entire home prepared a surprise celebration, organized in secret, with every resident, staff member, and even several families involved. Bridget presented Trudy with a scrapbook, its pages filled with letters, drawings, and photos, each one a testament to how she had changed their lives. That night, as music played and lanterns glowed, Trudy stood to speak. I came here against my will, angry and afraid. But you all taught me something. Home is where you are needed, where you make a difference. Thank you for letting me help, and for letting me belong." There was not a dry eye in the room. The mayor, attending with her own mother, rose to present Trudy with a special recognition for transforming Sunnydale into the heart of Willowbrook. As the celebration wound down, Trudy slipped away for a quiet walk in the garden. She looked at the vibrant flowers, the handmade signs, and the laughter spilling from the building, and felt a sense of belonging deeper than any she'd known before. She had turned a place of endings into a new beginning, not just for herself, but for everyone who crossed Sunnydale's threshold. Spring came early to Sunnydale, and with it, a gentle warmth that seemed to touch every corner of the home. The garden Trudy had revived exploded into color. Tulips, daffodils, and pansies crowded the beds, birds sang from freshly cleaned feeders, and the air hummed with quiet contentment. The change wasn't just visible in the blooms. It was in the voices that rang out during breakfast, the hands that joined for group walks, and the daily greetings traded between residents and staff. For Trudy, each day was a new gift. She had not only survived her forced move to Sunnydale, but had turned her new chapter into a story of transformation and hope. Visitors now arrived from neighboring towns just to see the home that everyone was talking about. Trudy became a legend of sorts, though she always insisted she was just a stubborn old woman with an idea or two. The culture Trudy inspired continued to flourish. Residents rotated as council chairpersons, ensuring everyone's voice was heard. The garden became a teaching space for local schoolchildren, connecting the young and old through shared wonder. The book club published its first anthology, full of resident memoirs and poems. Even staff turnover dropped, as employees found renewed purpose and joy in their work. Sunnydale's annual Spring Festival drew a record crowd. For the first time, Trudy's own family arrived early and stayed late. Emily and Charles apologized for their hasty decision, admitting they'd only wanted what was best. "You did far more than we ever imagined, Mom," Emily said, hugging her tightly. On a bright afternoon, the town council dedicated a small plaque in the garden, in honor of Gertrude "Trudy" Lawrence, whose courage turned a house into a home. Trudy stood beside the plaque, surrounded by friends, staff, family, and dozens of residents whose lives she'd changed. As the sun set that evening, Trudy sat quietly among the flowers. She reflected on her journey, her fear, her anger, and the risks she'd taken to make something beautiful out of loss. She realized that her story was a lesson for anyone who ever felt forgotten or forced into the shadows, that it's never too late to bloom, never too late to lead, and never too late to become the beating heart of something extraordinary. As laughter drifted out from the lounge and lanterns flickered to life along the garden path, Trudy smiled, deeply content. She was exactly where she was meant to be, needed, loved, and remembered. And Sunnydale, once just a stop on life's last journey, had become the most popular place in town, a place where every ending was also a beginning.